Hi, today we have Sega Game Gear, which is essentially Sega Master Systems, portable Sega Master Systems. I got this device from my colleague Bruce. Thank you, Bruce. It came with this TV tuner. I'm not sure if it has any use today, probably not, but we'll take a look at this one. The problem with this is that it has pretty much no sound. It's very, very dim, and the display has some issues. By issues, I mean it's very faint, and there's some lines and artifacts on the screen. Let me show you that. So I've put the batteries in, obviously. Same on the other side. Let's put a good old Sonic game in there, and I'll power it up. And you probably can't see this, but see this? So that's what I'm getting. Yeah, let me just try with the brightness level. So as you can see, there is the game. It works essentially. You can see the game there, Sonic, but there's a lot of artifacts on the screen, and it's very, very dim, regardless of the brightness, and also the sound. Even on max, you can barely hear it. I mean, it's pretty much not there. So the most likely reason for all this are the caps, the capacitors that Sega used on this device. They were not the highest quality capacitors, and they just need to be replaced. So, by the way, in order to open it up, you'll need to take out these Phillips screws, and I think there's also some screws here in the battery compartment. No, they're not. There's no screws there. But you need to take out these screws. These are Phillips, all Phillips screws. And there's that one, that security kind of screw that Sega used. You need a special screwdriver for this. I'm not sure if the camera will. It probably won't. But I'll show you the in the video. I'll show you the close-up of this, how this screw looks. So I'll do that off camera. I'll disassemble this, and I'll show you the motherboard. So the screws are out, and by the way, there are screws in the battery compartment. The Phillips screws right here and right here. So to open it up, just be kind of careful, because there's wires on this side. So you flip it just like that, and these are the wires that you need to be careful. So this here on this side is the soundboard, and this here is the power board, so power supply essentially. So, and again, this thing most likely doesn't work because of these caps here, and sound obviously doesn't work because of these caps. We'll also replace caps on the power board as well. This can be kind of tricky because these are sort of surface mount capacitors, so we'll need to be very careful. I'm not sure how we're going to do that. We'll be able to desolder some of them, but some of them are kind of tricky to get to. Like, for example, I'm not sure if you can see these ones here. They have small cap and a small resistor right next to it, so it'll be kind of hard to desolder. But yeah, let's take the whole thing under the microscope, and let's see what we can do. By the way, I will be disconnecting these connectors, these cables, and this one as well. One thing to note, just be careful, use pliers to disconnect them, and be careful to pry this thing. So this part here, yeah, you probably can't see this, but this part is obviously soldered to the board, and this is the part on the outside that you need to take out. Same thing on this connector and on this connector. So I'll take this out of camera, and I'll take the board under the microscope. You probably couldn't see the this connector clearly previously, so I'll show you how to disconnect it under the microscope. So as you can see, this part here, it's kind of darker shade, I think. So this is obviously connected to the board. This part here, this white part, is what you need to take out. So how you do that, you just grab it gently with the pliers. Just be careful and only grab the white part, and the same thing on the other side. And it's really hard to do under the microscope. Let me do it like that. Maybe that'll be easier for me. And it's out. So just grab the connector like that on both sides and it will come out. Okay, so the board is out, or the back part of the device is out, and these are the caps I was talking about. So as you can see, some of them can be tricky to remove, because just here, these are the pads for the cap, and these are the two caps and resistor. And this one will also be tricky because we have this, I don't know what this is, transformer, I guess, something, I don't know what this is. And you know, to get here, this will be very tricky. Plus there's that plastic connector. We need to be careful not to burn it. Yeah, so there's quite a lot of these caps here. So obviously more on the power board and on the soundboard. So one way to tackle those is to, and I'll try that with this big one here, is to just, I think there's some glue underneath, or not on this one, is to just wiggle those. So just like that. Just be careful not to damage the, yeah, there you go. So that's one out. Another option would be to come with the soldering iron and just desolder these two pads, and that's what I'll try on this one. Let me just check if this one has any. Okay, so the glue is released. There is some sort of adhesive underneath. Some of them are kind of loose, some of them are stuck there. So this one is now loose. So let's just try and desolder those with the good old soldering iron. So I'll use this kind of bent tip, try to get to both of these pads there and hit them up at the same time. There's I don't know what this is, coil or something. I need to be careful not to touch it. So let me try. Not sure if this has enough heat transfer, this tip. Yeah, it heats it up. Again, careful. This capacitor is in the way, so I'm not sure I can do this that easy. Yep. Let me just add some fresh solder. So I'll just add a little bit of fresh solder to these joints. Like that. And just like that. Okay, so this should help, I think. So let's try and remove it now. It's almost there. Yep. So that's another way of doing this. Again, it will be tricky here because it's very hard to get to those, and this tip is not huge. Smaller one wouldn't probably have enough heat transfer. So let me try take this one with the way we did it with the first one. So I'll just wiggle it and we'll see if it comes out. Yeah, this is glued. I need pliers. So, and very gently Okay, I think the glue is still there. It's free now, so I don't have much control with this plier, so I'll try like that. Just wiggle it. Watch carefully what happens with the pads and with the legs. We don't want the lifted pads. I mean, we can fix it, but I think we're almost there. Yep, perfect. I think this is quite good way doing this. I'll try take out this one and this one with the soldering iron, just to be on the safe side. So a little bit of fresh solder. See if I can get there at all. Yeah. And flux will probably help as well. Let me do it like this. Okay. Let's see if it will come out. There. And we'll do the same thing with the next one here, which is C54. So I'll add some little bit of fresh solder. I think I'll add some flux as well. So sorry about that. So let me add some flux. Not much. Actually, let me see first if it's... Yeah, this thing is stuck, so we need to... unglue it. Okay. I think it's free. Yep. And we can take it out now. So again, heat both sides. And it's gone. So all caps on the motherboard have now been removed, all solder removed and all pads cleaned. I didn't record the process as it's straightforward and there's no magic to that. Just use a wick to remove old solder and clean the area with isopropyl alcohol. To solder new caps, just add some solder to one of the pads, and my preference is to add solder to the pad that's accessible or where there's easy access to it, so it will hold the cap in place. Then go ahead and solder the other leg of the cap and go back and make sure the first leg or the leg that you started with is nice and shiny. So in this case, this pad that's away from the plastic connector is quite well. It's easily accessible. So I started with this one and went to solder the other one. Just be careful that plastic connector is very close to the cap, so make sure you don't melt it. So that's done. This cap is done. And I repeat the same process for all the remaining caps. But one advice I have is that you prepare the caps beforehand. And by what I mean by that is bend the legs so that the caps can lay flat on the board. Also make sure and triple check polarity. So again, have all your caps prepared and sorted so that you know where each one goes and start soldering. Again, make sure some of the caps, I think 2 or 3 caps are the same values, but need to be bent kind of differently. So make sure you don't confuse the two. Just again, double or triple check polarity before you solder anything, or even before you bend the legs. Again, it's best to have all these caps prepared and legs already bent. Another thing is that most likely you won't find exact same sizes as the caps of the exact same size as the original ones, and your caps, just as mine here, will be a lot larger. So sometimes you'll need to be creative. So you need to bend the legs and position the caps in a way that they don't interfere with anything. So in this example, that large, big pad there that you can see on the left, that's actually where the standoff will be, and it will be flush on the motherboard. So make sure when you see these large pads, make sure your caps are not in the way. So again, position the caps in the way that they don't interfere with anything. Doesn't really matter how you place them, just make sure they are flat on the board and they don't kind of obstruct those paths or anything else. They can lay on top of other components. It's fine. There's still some room between the bottom case, so it's fine. And sometimes, just like in this case, so C54 and C55, one of the caps has to be soldered in opposite direction. So as you can see here, C54 should be placed towards the right, and I'm soldering it the other way around. So that's because I have those caps that I have are quite large, and C54 would kind of obstruct C55. So I have to solder it kind of the other way around to make room for C55. Again, that's not a problem. It will. It's a bit long, but again, it's fine. The case will close, no problem. Just make sure the polarity is right. So double check before you start soldering or bending the legs of the caps. Just make sure it's correct. So yeah, that is very important, unless obviously you want to see or want to hear the puff and see magic smoke. Also, make sure you check the order, how you solder the caps. As you can see in this case, if I solder C55 first, I'd have access to C54 wouldn't be that easy. So it's a lot easier to solder C54 and then solder C55. So as you can see I'll just prepare the paths first, or one of the paths. And as you can see here, C55 is exactly the same size as C54, and it's long. So yeah, solder C54 first. It'll be much easier later. So again, I will repeat the process for all remaining caps, just to repeat. Make sure you have the legs of the caps prepared, make sure the caps lay flat on the board. Make sure that the solder joints are nice and shiny. Then clean the area and you'll be okay. And again, and I know I've mentioned it a few times, double or triple check that the polarity is correct. And just one final thing, when you're soldering these caps or any components, make sure your soldering iron tip is touching both the pad and the leg. And that way you'll make sure that the legs will make a good connection and contact, and solder joint will be fine. And also, full disclosure, as you can see here, I think it's this one, C1, yeah. So I'm soldering 47 microfarad cap, and the original one was 33. Unfortunately, I don't have 33 microfarad caps at hand, so I ordered them obviously, and I will replace that 47 microfarad cap. But it, as far as I can see, it's on the power line for the display. So being on the power line, I think 47 microfarad should be okay. There is quite a big difference between 33 microfarad and 47 microfarad, but yeah, I think it'll be fine. So again, once I have the 33 microfarad caps, I'll solder them. So I'll replace that 47 microfarad cap. Also, as you can see here, make sure that you don't breach any other components. Like in this case, just don't go crazy with the solder and don't breach that that component. And also make sure you clean everything. Anyway, the main board is now done, so let's move to the sound/audio board. There's just two screws that secure the board, but you'll also need to remove that black plastic cover, or whatever it is. It's glued to the other part of the case, and I've had hard time removing it, but it can be removed with a little bit of patience. Just lift the sides gently, and again some patience, and it will come off. I don't think you'll be able to remove the soundboard without removing that black stuff, but yeah, it can be removed. So there's just 3 caps on my board, at least on my version, and they are all through-hole caps. And normally I'd use the soldering gun to remove those, but it's stored away somewhere, and I don't do that through-hole stuff too often, so it's stored. My desoldering gun is stored somewhere in the cupboard, so it'd be quicker to remove those 3 caps with just soldering iron. So how I do that, I just add fresh solder to both joints, heat up either both pads if I can, or in which case the cap can be easily removed once you heat up both legs. And make sure it's the solder is kind of flowing, and then just pull the cap, and it will come off very easily. And once you do that, you may end up with the solder in those holes, through holes. So just again, add fresh solder, use wick, and wick the thing out. And again, just repeat as many times as needed. Sometimes it's kind of hard to get out the old solder, but add new solder, add some flux, and you'll be fine. So once you have your holes free of any hole solder, the area cleaned and all that, just place new cap. Oh, again, double check polarity. Um, and how I do that, I just hold the cap with one hand, put some flux on one of the legs, and add some solder to the soldering iron tip, so that I have the solder essentially on the tip, and then just touch it, and the solder will flow and secure that leg. And by soldering just one, the leg gives me opportunity to make any adjustments if they are needed. So if the cap is not exactly how I want it, I can move it, just as you can see here. Just make sure those caps are flat on the board, because again, there's limited space, and you don't want those caps to be, sticking out. So once one leg is done, you can then go ahead and solder the other leg, and you can always come back to that first one and add some more solder if needed. Make sure there's no bridges or anything like that, and just cut off those legs, and clean the area. Again, I always clean the area. I hate when I see my boards or anything with nasty remains of soldering and flux and burnt flux. So yeah, clean the area. Looks better. Now, obviously, some caps are bigger, or the legs are are too far away, so it's you can't really heat up both at the same time. So just heat up one of the legs, kind of bend the cap. Obviously, add some fresh solder first. That always makes things easier. And just bend the cap to one side, then to the other side, and as you can see here, and just repeat the process, and it will come out finally. So don't, again, be careful. Don't go crazy. You will need a few or several attempts before it will come out. But yeah, just make sure you don't lift any pads. Again, we can fix that, but why bother if we can do it nice and clean? And then, as usual, just remove the old solder, clean the area, and put the new caps in place. So solder them exact same way as previously. So some flux, solder on the iron tip, and to the other leg, and just repeat the process. So now we'll move to the power board or power supply, and in order to remove it, you need to remove that big metal shield. It's easy. Just 4 screws. Just remove those screws. Remove the that cover, and then there's again just 2 screws holding the board in place. So remove those screws, and the board will come out. And that board has a few, 3 or 4 or 5 surface mount caps, and it makes the job slightly more tricky, or maybe involved. Normally it's easy. I just use and the hot air station and to remove those caps. But in this case, there's quite a lot of plastic. There's very small area, and there's 2 plastic connectors. There's the audio jack, or sorry, power jack. This is the power board, obviously. So yeah, I won't be using the hot air in this case. Obviously, I could use hot tweezers, but I don't have them. So I'll just use soldering iron. And how I do that is kind of similar to the through the hole, through hole caps. So just add fresh solder to both sides and then heat up one side of the cap and try kind of bend it or lift just one side. Again, don't go crazy, just a little tiny bit, and it should kind of lift that side. Once that's done, go to the other side and do the same thing. Again, when you're lifting that side or any of those sides, just remove the soldering iron tip and hold it for a second or two so that the solder hardens, so you don't solder it back again in place. Again, just be gentle, because you're risking lifting those pads that they can be very easily be damaged. So just step by step, just repeat the process several times on both sides, and the cap will come out. Then obviously remove the remaining old solder, clean the area with isopropyl alcohol. Make sure it's clean, make sure the pads have not been lifted, not damaged, or anything like that. And yeah, you should be good. It's doable. Some of these are kind of hard to get, like that there will be one of those caps is again close to that plastic connector. I think it's C3, as you can see. And make sure you have the right soldering iron tip. Maybe before you even heat it up, just try if it fits, if you're comfortable. It has to be fairly kind of thin, but again, it has to have enough heat transfer so you can remove it. So just to repeat the process again, add fresh solder, add some flux, that also helps quite a lot, and heat up the area. Again, try touching the pad and the cap leg, so don't worry about any melted plastic or anything like that. We won't be using those caps again, so melted plastic here on the cap, obviously, at the base of the cap, it's not a problem. Yeah, you can damage those caps, no problem. Just don't damage the pads. That's the most important thing here. And again, be very gentle. Don't try to do it in one go. Just you need at least a few attempts to remove those. I know it's quite a lot of work, and it's not the stuff that I would want to do every day. But again, in this case, in order to use hot air safely, I'd probably have to remove all those plastic connectors, and that's a lot of work, and I just don't want to do that. Again, if you have trouble, just add some flux, add some fresh solder, and you'll be fine. Don't use force. You shouldn't really need to force anything. Just move it to the side or bend it. I don't know. Just lift one side very gently. But before you lift it, make sure obviously the solder kind of flows in the area, so it's fine. As you can see, some areas are kind of hard to get to, but it's all doable. And don't be afraid to add like a lot of solder. The more solder on that joint, the better, because it will heat up faster essentially, and you'll make sure that the whole area is heated up and the solder is flowing. There's obviously other ways of removing SMD caps. people using pliers and all that, but I'm not comfortable doing this. There's huge risk of lifting pads, and then again it can be fixed, but there's additional work with that, and yeah, that's not the way to do it, in my opinion. And as I said, with this one, it's C3. Just use appropriate soldering iron tip. And as you can see, I'm using that bent one, which is, it looks large, but that's under microscope. It's quite small, but I think it will have enough heat transfer to remove that cap. So just be very careful. I mean, if you touch that connector and just melt a small point or small place, that should be fine. But just again, if you keep touching it, and you will destroy it at some point, and you won't be able to put that connector there. So be careful, especially with this one. But as you can see, even in this tight spot, it can be done. So now, with all the caps removed and the board cleaned, we need to solder new caps in place. And again, I will repeat it again and again. Make sure the polarity is correct before you solder the cap. So there's two ways, two options people use to solder SMD caps. I'll show you both. So this is the first one, where you kind of prep the pad, add solder to one of the pads, then place the cap, heat up that solder, that pad, and push the cap so that it stays in place or lays flat on the board. I've been using this method years ago, but I don't like it. In my opinion, that's not the best way of doing this, because you'll have hard time positioning the caps. So first of all, it won't lay flat on the board. Then when you push it down, then it can move, and it will move most likely, and you won't get consistent results, and you won't look good, and yeah, the caps won't kind of sit flat on the board. So yeah, if you want to use that, that's fine. Just make sure the cap sits flat on the board. Doesn't need to be like perfect, but yeah, make sure it sits flat there. And again, just if needed, go back and add more solder or fresh solder to the pads to make sure there's connection. So I'll do another cap with this method, and again, I'm checking the polarity, making sure the polarity is right, and just repeat the process. So heat up the pad. Flux will probably help as well, and then push the cap. But as you can see here, when you're pushing, especially the small caps, they will move. So as you can see, this one is definitely not perfect, and it will work. There's still good connection and no problem there. But there's a lot better method or way of doing this. Just don't add any solder. Just add flux to either one pad or both pads, and just once you add flux, and again, just make sure you have the right polarity, as you can see. So add some flux. I'm adding just to one pad, but you can as well add flux to both pads, and then you have freedom, all freedom you want. You can position the cap any way you want. That flux will actually help hold the cap in place, and then add some solder to your soldering iron tip and just touch it up. And as you can see, the cap doesn't move. You need to push it down. Don't need to do anything else. Just add some flux, place the cap, make sure it's in the right position, touch it with the soldering iron tip, and then solder the other pad. And again, you can come back that first pad if you think there's not enough solder or the connection is not perfect, and just redo it. So as you can see, this is, in my opinion, a lot better way of soldering SMD caps. So don't put solder on any of the pads, just use flux initially, position the cap, make sure the polarity is right, and that's a lot easier in my opinion, and it looks a lot better. Because again, the cap, you're 100% sure that the cap sits flat on the board. Anyway, everything is in place. All new caps are in place. So clean the board, make sure everything is nice and clean, put everything back in place. Don't forget about these covers, so that metal shield and that black plastic part. Don't forget about those. Put everything back in place, and yeah, you should be good. Okay, so the Game Gear is reassembled. As you can see, the board there recapped, everything is in place. I just I won't be just putting back the screws. Let's just check if it works or if there's any improvement. So I'll put the batteries back in. And the game. And as you can see, there's huge improvement. We have sound. We have very nice screen. It's probably not, as you can see, it's quite bright. It looks really good in person. I'm not sure if the camera, if you can see it through the camera, but yeah, it looks really nice. So I'm very happy with this. As you can see, most of the problems with these Game Gears are caused by capacitors. So if you have a Game Gear, go ahead and replace your capacitors, because they will, first of all, they will cause problems, and then they will start leaking at some point. So yeah, go ahead and replace your caps, and you'll have really nice device. There's I'm not sure if I will be doing this, but there's backlight mod where you replace this fluorescent tube that's originally in this device with some modern LED backlight or something like that. It looks much better, and it also the battery life is a lot better, because the fluorescent tube takes a lot of power. So, but yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to do this. I really like it, like this device in this shape and state. So yeah, that's all for today. Thank you very much. If you like my videos, please consider subscribing to my channel, and we'll do something different in the next video. Thank you.